My name is Rylan Ventor, and I learned about my wife's affair while fixing a broken table saw in my workshop at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. The irony wasn't lost on me. There I was, trying to repair something when my marriage was falling apart upstairs. I run a small furniture restoration business from our garage. 23 years of sanding, staining, and rebuilding other people's broken things. The work pays the bills, barely, but it keeps my hands busy and my mind occupied. At least it used to. The house was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen above. Meira had gone to bed hours ago, or so I thought. Then I heard her voice drifting through the heating vents. Soft, intimate, nothing like the clipped professional tone she used with me anymore. "I just want someone who makes me feel young again, Rowan," she whispered into her phone. "I'm tired of Rylan's routine. He's more like a roommate than a husband these days." I set down my screwdriver and listened harder. The heating ducts in our old house carried sound like a telegraph system. Every word came through crystal clear. "When can we meet again?" she continued. "I know it's risky, but I can't stop thinking about last weekend." If I had a nickel for every time she'd complained about my predictability, I could have bought myself a personality transplant. But hearing her plan secret meetings with some guy named Rowan, that hit different. I climbed the basement stairs quietly, each step creaking despite my careful placement. The hallway was dark, but I could see light under our bedroom door. Meira's voice had dropped to a whisper, but I caught fragments. "The gym tomorrow, after my court hearing. Can't wait to see you." Rowan. The name bounced around my skull like a pinball. I'd heard it before. Meira had mentioned joining a new fitness center downtown, something called Elite Body Works. She'd been going there 3 nights a week for the past 2 months, coming home energized in ways I hadn't seen in years. I retreated to my workshop and sat among the sawdust and wood stain fumes. 25 years of marriage. 2 kids, Ollie, 21 and fresh out of college, and Miranda, 19 and building some kind of social media empire from her dorm room. A quarter century of shared meals, shared bills, shared everything, and she wanted someone younger. The next morning, Meira acted like nothing had happened. She stood at the kitchen counter in her charcoal business suit, scrolling through emails while her coffee grew cold. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore to court, and her makeup was flawless, as always. "I'll be late tonight," she said without looking up. "Client dinner." "Which client?" I asked, pouring myself coffee from the same pot she'd ignored. "The Henderson case. You wouldn't know them." She grabbed her briefcase and headed for the garage. I watched through the window as she backed her silver BMW out of the driveway, talking on her phone before she'd even reached the street. "Client dinner? Right. I spent the morning researching Elite Body Works. Their website was all sleek photos and motivational quotes." The staff page showed a lineup of impossibly fit trainers, including one Rowan Carrick, 29 years old, certified in holistic fitness coaching and lifestyle transformation. His bio mentioned growing up in California before moving to our Rust Belt town to help people discover their best selves. His headshot showed the kind of guy who probably used the word journey unironically. Square jaw, perfect teeth, the kind of tan that came from somewhere other than our cloudy Midwestern skies. Everything I wasn't. I closed the laptop and went back to my workshop. The broken table saw wasn't going to fix itself, and I had bills to pay. But as I worked, a plan started forming. If Meira wanted to play games, I could learn the rules. That afternoon, I drove to Elite Body Works. The building was a converted warehouse in the trendy part of downtown, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. I parked across the street and waited. At 4:30, Meira's BMW pulled into the lot. She emerged wearing yoga pants and a fitted tank top, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. I watched her walk through the glass doors, her stride confident and purposeful. 20 minutes later, she came out with Rowan Carrick. Even from across the street, I could see why she was interested. The guy moved like he owned the sidewalk, all casual confidence and easy smiles. They stood close together by her car, his hand resting on her lower back as they talked. Then he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. I sat in my truck, watching my wife of 25 years make out with a fitness instructor young enough to be our son's older brother. The kiss lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. When they finally separated, Meira looked around nervously before getting in her car. Rowan watched her drive away, then headed back inside with the satisfied expression of a man who'd just won something valuable. I drove home and went straight to my workshop. Among my tools and supplies, I found what I was looking for, a small wireless camera I'd bought last year to monitor the shop when I was away. It was about the size of a matchbox, designed to look like a smoke detector. If Meira wanted to keep secrets, she'd have to work harder for them. Installing surveillance equipment in your own home feels wrong on about 17 different levels, but discovering your wife's affair tends to recalibrate your moral compass. I placed the first camera in the living room, tucked behind a picture frame where it could capture the couch and coffee table. The second went in the kitchen, disguised as part of the smoke detector system. The hardest part was waiting. For 3 days, I went through the motions of normal life while the cameras recorded everything. I fixed a dining room set for the Hendersons, the same clients Meira claimed to be having dinner with. I ate breakfast across from my wife, made small talk about the weather, and pretended I didn't know she was texting another man under the table. On Friday night, everything changed. Meira announced she was going to her sister Ember's house for girl time. Ember lived 20 minutes away in a subdivision where every house looked identical and every lawn was precisely manicured. She'd reinvented herself as a life coach after her third divorce, dispensing wisdom about authentic living and manifesting abundance to anyone willing to pay her consultation fees. "Don't wait up," Meira said, grabbing her overnight bag. "We're doing a whole wellness retreat thing. Meditation, vision boards, the works." I nodded and wished her a good time, then watched her drive away. As soon as her taillights disappeared, I pulled up the camera feeds on my laptop. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then, around 9 o'clock, I heard the front door open. Footsteps in the hallway, voices in the kitchen. I switched to the kitchen camera and felt my stomach drop. Meira was there, all right. But instead of driving to Ember's house, she'd come back with Rowan Carrick. They moved around my kitchen like they owned the place, opening wine, laughing at private jokes, touching each other with the casual intimacy of an established couple. "This is so much better than that cramped apartment," Meira said, running her hand along the granite countertop I'd installed 3 years ago. "Your husband has good taste," Rowan replied, looking around approvingly. "This place has character. Rylan built most of it himself. He's handy that way." She said it like she was discussing a useful appliance. They moved to the living room with their wine glasses, and I switched camera feeds. Rowan settled onto the leather couch, the one Meira and I had picked out for our 20th anniversary, and pulled her down beside him. "When are you going to tell him?" he asked, stroking her hair. "Soon. I just need to figure out the logistics, the business, the house, the kids' college funds." Meira leaned against his shoulder. "Ember's helping me work through it all." "Your sister seems to have it figured out." 3 divorces will teach you a few things," Meira laughed. "She says the key is preparation. Document everything, secure your assets, then strike fast and clean." I paused the recording and stared at the screen. Ember wasn't just providing emotional support, she was coaching Meira through a strategic divorce. My sister-in-law, the woman who'd eaten Thanksgiving dinner at my table for 15 years, was helping my wife plan my destruction. The recording continued for another 2 hours. I watched them tour my house like prospective buyers, discussing which furniture they'd keep and which rooms they'd redecorate. Rowan admired my workshop, joking about converting it into a home gym. Meira showed him our bedroom, pointing out the walk-in closet and explaining how much space she'd have once my clothes were gone. They talked about my business like it was a commodity to be divided. Meira had apparently been documenting our finances for months, building a case that I was hiding assets or mismanaging our accounts. She'd already consulted with a divorce attorney, not her usual family law colleague, but a specialist who handled complex asset division cases. "The beauty of it," she explained to Rowan, "is that he won't see it coming. Rylan thinks we're just going through a rough patch. He has no idea how far this has gone." I saved the recordings and closed the laptop. Outside, rain drummed against the workshop windows, and the old building creaked in the wind. I sat surrounded by half-finished furniture projects and tried to process what I'd learned. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was planning a complete life overhaul, with me as the discarded component. And she was doing it with the tactical precision of a military campaign, guided by my sister-in-law's experience in marital warfare. The next morning, Meira returned home with stories about Ember's wellness retreat. She described meditation sessions and vision board exercises, speaking with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely spent the evening in spiritual contemplation. If I hadn't watched the recordings, I might have believed her. "You look tired," she said, studying my face over her coffee cup. "Everything okay?" "Just working on a difficult restoration," I replied. "Sometimes the damage goes deeper than you initially think." She nodded sympathetically and went back to her phone. I spent the weekend planning my next move. If Meira and Ember wanted to play strategic games, I needed to understand the full scope of their operation. The cameras had given me valuable intelligence, but I needed more. On Monday morning, I called an old friend from high school who'd become a private investigator. Pete Morrison ran a small agency that specialized in insurance fraud and marital investigations. We'd kept in touch over the years, mostly through Christmas cards and occasional encounters at the hardware store. "Rylan Ventor," Pete said when I walked into his office. "Haven't seen you since the Henderson reunion. What brings you to my corner of the world?" I explained the situation without mentioning the cameras. Pete listened with the neutral expression of someone who'd heard similar stories countless times. 25 years is a long run," he said when I finished. "Most people don't throw that away lightly. You sure there's not some way to work this out?" "I'm sure," I said. "Right now, I just need to know what I'm dealing with." Pete quoted his rates and explained his process. For a reasonable fee, he could provide comprehensive surveillance, financial investigation, and documentation that would hold up in court. He'd handled dozens of similar cases and knew all the tricks people use to hide assets or manipulate divorce proceedings. "One thing to consider," he said as I prepared to leave. "Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. If your wife is planning something, you might want to get ahead of it." I shook his hand and promised to think it over. But as I drove home, I realized I'd already made my decision. Meira wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But she was about to learn that her predictable husband had a few surprises of his own. Our 25th wedding anniversary fell on a Thursday in October. Meira suggested dinner at Castellanos, the Italian place where we'd had our first official date back when she was in law school and I was running my father's cabinet shop. The restaurant had been renovated twice since then, but they still served the same seafood risotto that had impressed her all those years ago. I made reservations for 7 o'clock and spent the afternoon preparing my surprise. Pete's investigation had yielded a treasure trove of information over the past 2 weeks. Bank records showing cash withdrawals that corresponded to hotel visits, credit card receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, phone records documenting hundreds of calls and texts between Meira and Rowan, plus a suspicious number of conversations with Ember. But the real prize was the video footage Pete had captured outside Elite Bodyworks. 43 minutes of high-definition evidence showing my wife and her trainer in various states of intimacy, from hand-holding to passionate embraces to one particularly explicit encounter in the front seat of her BMW. I compiled everything onto a USB drive and tested it on my laptop. The presentation was chronological, starting with innocent-looking gym sessions and progressing to increasingly obvious romantic encounters. The final clip showed Meira and Rowan discussing their plans for after her divorce, including a weekend trip to California to meet his family. At 6:30, I put on my best suit, the navy blue one Meira had bought me for Miranda's high school graduation. I slipped the USB drive into my jacket pocket and headed for Castellanos. Meira was already there, seated at our usual table by the window. She'd worn the black dress I'd given her for Christmas, and her hair was styled in loose waves that made her look younger. For a moment, seeing her in the soft restaurant lighting, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 26 years ago. "You look beautiful," I said, kissing her cheek before sitting down. "Thank you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I can't believe it's been 25 years. We ordered wine and made small talk about the kids. Miranda had called that afternoon to wish us a happy anniversary from her dorm room. Ollie was working late at his new job, but promised to stop by over the weekend. Normal family conversations that felt surreal, given what I knew about Meira's secret life. "I have something special planned for tonight," I said, as our appetizers arrived. "Oh?" Meira raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Just a little trip down memory lane." We ate and talked, playing the role of a happily married couple celebrating a milestone. Meira told stories about her recent cases, and I shared updates about my business. Anyone watching would have seen two middle-aged people comfortable in each other's company, weathering the challenges of a long marriage. At 8:30, I excused myself and found the restaurant manager. Tony Castellano was the son of the original owner, a guy I'd known since high school. I explained that I wanted to show a video presentation for our anniversary and asked if I could use the dining room's television system. "Of course," Tony said. "Anniversary videos are always nice. Just give me the drive and I'll cue it up." I handed him the USB and returned to our table. Meira was checking her phone, probably texting with Rowan about their plans for later. She looked up as I sat down, her expression guilty for just a moment before shifting back to neutral. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Perfect. I just arranged a little surprise." The lights dimmed slightly, and Tony's voice came over the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special anniversary celebration tonight. Rylan and Meira Ventor are celebrating 25 years of marriage, and Rylan has prepared a video tribute to their relationship." The main television screen flickered to life, and I watched Meira's face as the first image appeared. It was security footage from Elite Bodyworks, showing her walking into the building with Rowan's hand on her back. Her wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. The video continued, showing progressively more intimate moments. Meira and Rowan holding hands in the parking lot, embracing by her car, the passionate encounter in the front seat that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Around us, the restaurant fell utterly silent. Other diners looked toward the screen, their conversations fading as they grasped what they were witnessing. Tony stood motionless by the bar, his face drained of color. "Rylan," Meira whispered, "turn it off." But I was just getting started. The next clip showed audio from my home surveillance system, Meira and Rowan discussing their plans for my house, their casual dismissal of my feelings, their excitement about starting a new life together. "This is crazy," Meira said, louder now. "You're having some kind of breakdown." The final segment showed Meira and Ember strategizing about the divorce. My sister-in-law's voice filled the restaurant as she explained how to hide assets and manipulate custody arrangements. The audio was crystal clear, every word audible to the 50 or so people watching in stunned silence. When the video ended, I stood and raised my wine glass. "To 25 years of marriage," I said, my voice carrying across the silent dining room, "and to new beginnings." Meira's face had gone completely white. She sat motionless, staring at the now blank screen, while every eye in the restaurant focused on our table. "You're insane," she finally said. This is harassment." "This is truth," I replied, something we haven't had much of lately. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm leaving." "Give Rowan my regards," I called as she hurried toward the exit. "Tell him I'll be in touch soon." The restaurant remained silent until she was gone, then exploded into whispered conversations. I left money on the table to cover our bill and a generous tip for Tony, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. As I walked to my truck, I felt lighter than I had in months. The first phase of my plan was complete. Meira's secret was no longer secret, and everyone in our small town would know about it by morning. But this was just the beginning. My wife wanted a war. She was about to get one. The fallout from Castellanos started before I got home. My phone buzzed with text messages from friends, neighbors, and acquaintances who'd either been at the restaurant or heard about the incident secondhand. Small towns are like echo chambers. Gossip travels faster than emergency broadcasts. Meira's BMW wasn't in our driveway when I arrived. I checked the surveillance feeds and saw that she'd come home briefly around 9:30, packed a suitcase, and left again. Her destination was probably Ember's house, where they could regroup and plan their next move. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the familiar smells of wood stain and machine oil. The space felt like a sanctuary, insulated from the chaos I'd unleashed, but I knew this was just the calm before the storm. Sure enough, at 7 the next morning, my phone rang. Meira's lawyer. "Mr. Ventor, this is Patricia Holbrook from Holbrook & Associates. I represent your wife in a matter concerning your marriage." I'd never heard of Patricia Holbrook, which meant Meira had followed through on her plan to hire a specialist. "What can I do for you, Ms. Holbrook?" "My client would like to arrange a meeting to discuss the terms of your separation. Given last night's incident, she feels it's best to handle this matter as quickly and quietly as possible." "I'm sure she does." "Mr. Ventor, I should inform you that your actions at the restaurant constitute harassment and possibly criminal intimidation. My client is prepared to file a restraining order if necessary." I laughed, which seemed to catch her off guard. "Ms. Holbrook, everything in that video was recorded legally on my own property or in public spaces. Your client is welcome to file whatever she wants, but she might want to consider how that will look in court." There was a pause. "My client is willing to be reasonable about asset division if you're willing to cooperate. Tell your client that I'll be in touch soon, but I won't be cooperating with anything until I understand the full scope of what she's been planning." I hung up and called Pete Morrison. He answered on the second ring, sounding amused. "Saw your anniversary video made quite an impression," he said. "Half the town's talking about it." "Just getting started. What did you find on Ember?" Pete had been investigating my sister-in-law for the past week, and the results were fascinating. Ember's life coaching business was built on fabricated credentials and stolen content. She'd never completed any of the certification programs listed on her website, and most of her original techniques were plagiarized from legitimate therapists and self-help authors. More interesting was her financial situation. Despite charging premium rates for her services, Ember was drowning in debt. Credit cards, medical bills, and a second mortgage on her house that she was struggling to pay. She needed money desperately, which explained her enthusiasm for helping Meira plan a lucrative divorce. "There's something else," Pete said. "I found evidence that Ember's been skimming money from her clients. She runs these weekend retreat programs where people pay upfront for accommodations and meals, but she's been pocketing the deposits and canceling at the last minute, claiming family emergencies or health issues. How many clients? At least a dozen over the past 6 months. We're talking about 15,000 in fraudulent charges. I smiled. Ember's house of cards was about to collapse, and I was going to be the one pushing it over. Can you document everything? Already working on it. Give me another day or two. I spent the morning researching Rowan Carrick. Elite Bodyworks had an impressive website, but a deeper investigation revealed some interesting gaps in their star trainer's background. His California credentials were legitimate, but there was a 3-year period where he seemed to have disappeared from public records. A few phone calls to contacts in the fitness industry revealed the truth. Rowan had been fired from 2 previous gyms for inappropriate relationships with married clients. He had a pattern of targeting wealthy women going through marital problems, offering them emotional support and physical comfort while positioning himself as a relationship upgrade. The guy was a professional homewrecker, and Meira was just his latest mark. Armed with this information, I drove to Elite Bodyworks. The gym was busy with the lunch crowd, mostly professionals squeezing in quick workouts between meetings. I found Rowan in the weight room, spotting a client through a set of bench presses. Rowan Carrick? I approached him with my hand extended. I'm Rylan Ventor. I think you know my wife. The color drained from his face, but he maintained his composure. Mr. Ventor, I was wondering when we'd meet. I'll bet you were. I looked around the gym, noting the security cameras and the crowd of potential witnesses. Mind if we talk privately? He led me to a small office behind the reception area. The space was cramped and cluttered, with motivational posters covering the walls and a desk buried under protein supplement catalogs. Look, Rowan said, closing the door behind us. I know this is awkward, but Meira and we have something real. This isn't just some affair. Is that what you told the wives in California? His confident expression faltered. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. Jessica Palmer in San Diego. Amanda Chen in Los Angeles. Married women, unhappy marriages, and you swooping in to save them from their boring husbands until the gyms figured out what you were doing and fired you. Rowan sat down heavily in his desk chair. Those situations were different. Were they? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you have a very specific business model. Target wealthy married women and convince them their husbands don't appreciate them, then position yourself as the solution to all their problems. Meira's different, he insisted. We're planning a future together. No, you're not. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. Because I'm about to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are. Your boss, your clients, your landlord, everyone. You can't do that. Watch me. I stood to leave, then turned back. One more thing. If you contact my wife again, if you so much as drive past my house, I'll make sure those California gyms know where to find you. Something tells me they'd love to have a conversation about the money that went missing from their client accounts. The last part was a bluff, but Rowan's expression suggested it had hit close to home. I left him sitting in his cramped office and walked out through the main gym, noting the curious stares from staff and clients who'd probably heard about the restaurant incident. Phase 2 was complete. Now it was time to deal with Ember. Ember lived in Willowbrook Estates, a subdivision where every house looked like it had been designed by the same committee of people who'd never met an architectural cliché they didn't like. Her place was a colonial revival with fake shutters and a front porch that existed purely for aesthetic purposes. I rang the doorbell at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, knowing that Meira would probably be there. Sure enough, I could see her BMW parked in the garage through the open side door. Ember answered wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. She'd been pretty once, before 3 divorces and too much wine had left their marks around her eyes and mouth. Rylan, she said, not bothering to hide her hostility. What do you want? To talk. About business. I don't think we have anything to discuss. I think we do, especially concerning your coaching practice and some irregularities in your client accounts. Her face went pale, but she stepped aside to let me in. The house was decorated in the kind of aggressively neutral style that suggested someone trying too hard to project success. Everything was beige and cream and carefully arranged to look effortlessly elegant. Meira appeared in the living room doorway, wearing jeans and a sweater I'd given her for her birthday. She looked tired, older somehow, like the stress of the past few days had aged her. What are you doing here? She asked. Having a conversation with your sister about her business practices? I walked into the living room and set a manila folder on the coffee table. Ember, I think you should know that several of your former clients have been asking questions about missing deposits. Retreat fees that were paid but never refunded when you canceled at the last minute. Ember sat down across from me, her hands shaking slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. The Henderson retreat last month. The Morrison group in September. The Williams family weekend that got canceled because of your sudden family emergency. I opened the folder and spread out copies of bank records and email correspondence. $15,000 in deposits that somehow never made it back to your clients. Those were legitimate business expenses, Ember said, but her voice lacked conviction. Were they? Because according to your bank records, that money went to pay your mortgage and credit card bills. Meira moved closer, studying the documents. Ember, is this true? It's not what it looks like, Ember said quickly. I was going to pay everyone back. I just needed time to get caught up. Time you were planning to buy with Meira's divorce settlement, I said. That's what this whole thing has been about, hasn't it? You needed money, so you convinced my wife to throw away her marriage and split our assets. That's not true, Meira said, but she was looking at her sister with growing suspicion. Isn't it? I pulled out another document. Ember, want to tell Meira about the conversation you had with Patricia Holbrook? The one where you discussed your consultation fee for helping orchestrate this divorce? The room went silent. Ember stared at the document like it might burst into flames. You were charging me? Meira's voice was barely a whisper. It wasn't like that, Ember said desperately. I was just trying to protect you. Rylan doesn't appreciate what he has. You deserve better. You mean you deserved a cut of our assets. I stood up, gathering the documents. Meira, your sister has been playing you from the beginning. She needed money to cover her fraudulent business practices, so she convinced you to destroy our marriage and split everything we've built. Meira sank into a chair, her face pale. Is that true, Ember? I was trying to help you, Ember insisted. You were miserable. You said so yourself. I said I was going through a rough patch. Everyone goes through rough patches. And Rowan? I asked. Did you introduce them, or was that just a happy coincidence? Ember's silence was answer enough. You set the whole thing up, Meira said, understanding dawning in her voice. The gym membership, the introduction to Rowan, all of it. You needed to see what was possible, Ember said. You needed to remember what it felt like to be desired. I walked to the window and looked out at the perfectly manicured neighborhood. Well, this has been enlightening. Meira, you should know that I've already sent copies of all this information to the State Attorney General's office. They're very interested in Ember's business practices. You can't do that, Ember said, standing up quickly. I'll pay everyone back. I just need time. Time's up. I headed for the door. Oh, and Meira, Rowan won't be returning your calls. I had an interesting conversation with him yesterday about his previous employment history. It turns out you weren't his first married client, and you probably wouldn't have been his last. I left them there in Ember's beige living room, two women realizing they'd been playing a game where only one person knew the rules. The drive home took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. 25 years of marriage, reduced to accusations and evidence folders. Two kids who would have to choose sides in a war they didn't start. A business and a house and a life that would never be the same. But as I pulled into my driveway, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction. Just the calm that comes from finally understanding exactly where you stand. My phone buzzed with a text from Meira. We need to talk. I typed back, yes, we do, but not today. I went to my workshop and turned on the radio. There was furniture to restore, bills to pay, and a life to rebuild. It wouldn't be the life I'd planned 25 years ago, but it would be honest. And after everything that had happened, honesty felt like enough. The workshop smelled like sawdust and possibility. I picked up my tools and got back to work, fixing the things that could still be repaired.